2022 Special Town Board Meeting and Workshop. Please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. We had to call a special meeting for just a few resolutions because they really couldn't wait, and I'll get to that once we get to the resolutions. Mr. Clerk, would you call the roll?
Councilman Franco. Present. Councilman Deepan.
Present.
Councilman Marinero. Supervisor Delisandro.
Present, thank you. Okay, so we have two resolutions. First, well, we have three, but one will be tabled. The first resolution is the Water and Sewer Department to have approve a contract for tree removal. The town of East Fishkill oversees maintenance and operations for various water and sewer special districts. We are seeking tree removals as well as on-call emergency service for tree removals. The town circulated publicly available bid titled Town of East Fishkill Water and Sewer District's tree removal. They were due to town clerk's office on February 22nd, 2022. One response to the RFP, which is attached. The Water and Sewer District tree removal bid being hereby is awarded to Alpine Tree Service for the amount of $39,800. So, reason being, by DE's New York State law, we can't remove trees after March 31st. Is that correct?
March 30th, correct.
March 30th. Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, March 30th. So we tried to get this earlier done, but we really couldn't. We're in a tight time frame.
We actually added some more trees, and that's why we postponed it, to get these additional trees.
All right, excellent. That's excellent. So go ahead.
Just to give you a little brief, so, we've had all these, significant windstorms in recent years, and, as trees grow, they overhang our power lines that go into these plants, and we're always, reacting to trees taking out power lines into our plants, and we're trying to be proactive in this case and trying to remove, to the extent, a reasonable extent, trees and limbs that are near our overhead lines to these power plants to try to, diminish the times that, we're out of service at our water plants.
Okay,
So that's the intent behind this.
Okay, pretty cut and dry. Do I have a motion to award the tree removal bid?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried, thank you. Number 2, set the public hearing to increase the assessment for a Route 52 traffic improvement. We're going to table that. Number 1, we are waiting for the bid to come in. We don't have the final numbers yet. As we discussed at last town board meeting, all our bids for everything is sky high. The prices for everything, as everybody knows, fuel and products, everything is sky high, hard to get. So we're waiting to see what that is. So before we actually set the time for a public hearing to increase all those, we want to see what the bid is, number 1. And number 2, there are other proposed projects on the iPark campus, which would then would kick in more towards the traffic improvement district. So perhaps we don't need to raise them at all. So that would be a great thing. So we'll table that. And number 3 is authorized acquisition parcel on Route 52. All right, whereas the above parcel has been taken by Dutchess County for unpaid taxes, and it's approximately 16 acres, only about 2 acres, actually a little less than 2 acres, contains a very significant and sensitive wetlands, as well as deteriorating structure that causes line of sight issues with the intersection of Route 52 and a town road. There's a development right adjacent to it, and there's that dilapidated barn on this property that prohibits good sight distance there. So the county has offered the parcel to the town upon payment of the back taxes. So we are to acquire the said parcels from Dutchess County for the sum of $93,003. And of course, this resolution is subject to permissive referendum anytime we purchase town property. Is that correct, town attorney?
Correct.
So do I have a motion to purchase from the county a lot on Route 52.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Discussion? And Town Attorney, what is then the process once we set this
Once we
resolution?
set, once you adopt this, it will be published, we have to wait 30 days, and then the county requires payment before October 24th, I think it is.
Okay,
They always, before they sell properties that they've taken for back taxes, offer it to the municipality in which it is. And they have, and this is a parcel that's at a very complicated intersection.
Yes.
And it's really for, no use for future development.
right, and we don't, and then at that time, the town can't sell that property.
It would become a town-owned asset.
Right, okay, excellent. Any other questions or comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried, thank you. And that does it. So do I have a motion to close the special voting meeting, open the workshop?
So moved.
Have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you so much. Mr. Clerk, thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate you coming in for those two. So we have two items for discussion tonight. One is Pinewood Knolls Water District. So, as we've made mention several times, Pinewood Knolls is a older water district, which we had a hit for PFOs, PFOA, PFOS, and that we're working with the county health department, state health department on different scenarios on how we can fix that. There's only one source of water currently there, so that's why the problem, and we have to look for a secondary source. We've been mulling over many different scenarios. Perhaps the town engineer would like to go into
Yes.
it a little deeper, please?
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. So first of all, let me just kind of talk a little bit about what the contaminant that we found. So a notice did go out about a month or so ago in conjunction with the health department, kind of describing what was found and the effects of it. So I'll just read briefly from this. This was the drinking water notice from the health department in the town. And basically say, you are receiving this notice because testing well 2 in our public water systems found a chemical, if I can pronounce this, perfluorooctane sulfonic acid, PFOS, at a level of 10.9 parts per trillion. This is above the New York State's maximum contaminant level, MCL, of 10 parts per trillion for the PFOS in public drinking water. The MCL is set well below levels known for estimated to cause health effects. Consuming drinking water PFOS or at or somewhat above the MCL does not pose a significant health risk. Your water continues to be acceptable for all uses. So I just really want to stress that part, that while we do have a violation from the health department, and we do need to take action, this is not at its current level, a real health crisis. The health department says you can continue to use the water.
Okay.
They set these levels well below the limit so that the water supplier can begin to act to remedy the situation before it does become a health crisis. So that, I just wanted to put everybody's mind at ease a little bit, that we're not in any kind of crisis mode at these levels. With that said, we are looking at different solutions. They range from putting treatment at the source, trying to connect to another water system. It's a bit of a challenge. These fixes are not cheap. Our water systems have issues among themselves that we're working through, so we have a lot of things kind of going on at the same time, so there's not going to be a real quick remedy. However, we think that the quickest solution to try to move forward with, the quickest path, is to provide on-site treatment at the source. Okay, so we did meet with the health department. We discussed our plan with them. We're going to have to first start by doing a pilot test, because being that this is a new contaminant, the effects of treatment is not really well known. So basically what you have to do is a trial and error test, which we will hopefully start within the next 2 months with approval from the health department. And if that's successful, we'll install a treatment system at the location at Pinewood to get our levels down below to 10 parts per trillion. At the same time that we're doing that, we're also going to be applying for grant monies from the state to, hopefully put a permanent solution in, which would be to find an alternate source of water. We are, as the board knows, currently evaluating Beekman Water District for excess capacity, and those tests are ongoing. That's a potential source. There's also Hopewell North and Hamlet that may be a source, although we have things we're working through currently with that system, because we had to shut 4 wells off in the spring here, so, that has its challenges. So it may be that Beekman is the most viable source, but we're still doing testing. But we believe that the quickest solution is to install treatment at the site.
Okay, so we have several scenarios. We've been meeting with the Board of Health. It's a tough situation there.
They're isolated.
It's
finally.
isolated, exactly. That's why our master plan for all water systems in the town was to get interconnections, and that's what serves us best. We had PFOA hits right here in our Hopewell Hamlet wells. Because we're interconnected with other districts, we're able to shut those off and increase water from different districts. So that's the benefit of doing a big loop with all the districts. But it's
Interconnecting.
expensive.
Right. These projects are expensive. And the other thing I want to add, just for the residents, we have new developments that want to come knock on our door, and we're really trying to make sure that our current residents come first, in terms of our allocation of water. Water is a precious resource, and we are very mindful of that, and we have been pushing off certain developments to try to make sure that our existing residents, are the first ones to
Well, that's
have any
absolutely
excess.
right.
Yeah.
So the residents, keep in mind, we always have our residents, you are first. If there's new developments that come in, they'll have to wait until our residents are served first. So, any questions, any comments from the board? This has been it's a tough situation here.
Yeah.
It's a situation that with these new contaminants that we're going to be facing and other towns are going to be facing for quite some time, it seems like, especially with the low threshold. The low threshold, I know it's
Well, I would add, you raise a good point, Councilman Franco, that the federal limit is 70.
70, right.
Yeah.
And just to clarify, parts per trillion.
Right.
Yes.
But New York's law is so aggressive, their standard, that it's going to get pushed off to all the towns and the municipalities, and we're going to have to come up with some sort of remediation, and it's going to cost a ton.
Right, we entered into a class action lawsuit where we joined several different communities in New York State as well, looking for where these contaminants are originated from, and when they do that investigation, if they do, then perhaps we can get dollars back, right? Is that correct, Attorney?
Correct.
Yeah.
The other thing I'd like to add, kind of associated with this, and it's something we've been wrestling with, is, the town has our own well testing program that was enacted 10, 15 years ago upon transfer of property. And I think that stemmed from the Ryan Drive Superfund site and, contaminants that were found there. So, we have that in place. But currently, this test is not part of that, as this is a new contaminant. I believe that current test, which is like a modified Part 5 test, runs to the order of around $600 a year. And that covers MTBEs, petroleum-based contaminants. These tests, which run about $1,200, are not currently included in that program that we have. And it's tough for residents to have to, potentially absorb $1,800 to do a well test. But there's, the health department did bring that up. It's not mandatory, but, I'm just bringing it up for discussion that, it's something we may want to,
Yes, it's something this board is going to have to think about. It is difficult to do that, but we do have a well testing law that home sellers have to, new home buyers will have to do. And we have to think about adding this test to that number, because these are cancer-causing agents that never leave your body. Right. These are bad, bad things. This PFOA, PFOS is bad stuff. So we perhaps might have to amend that well testing law.
Because if you think about it, a person has a water test, they put confidence that, it passed the water test, my water is safe,
Absolutely.
But if you leave out certain things, and the average person, the layman, doesn't know, well, you left out this,
Right.
You left out that, you know, you're thinking your water's safe, oh, but I didn't know it had this. So
Right,
it's, you know, and the fact that it's so expensive, I mean, if it was $50, we wouldn't think twice about it, right?
Right.
But it's $1,200.
Right, well, the Board of Health did indicate that as this progresses and there be more and more testing, that the prices should come down with that testing, so that's a positive. Just like anything else, right? The more they have, then the prices go down sometimes, so. But we'll have to contemplate that, and we'll have to contemplate that soon. But definitely something we have to keep in mind here. We have a responsibility. I mean, when these people buy these homes and they have little children, you know, these children are drinking this.
You're in the
water.
home for 30 years drinking this water.
Yeah,
and,
right.
You know, it's.
Or the new ones coming with, you know, little kids and everything.
Yeah.
It's very concerning to us.
And again, Mr. Engineer, this has not really been tested for before, right? This is not part of the common
Last
water
year.
testing? Well,
no.
before last year.
Previously, no.
Oh, no, public water districts before last year did not have to test for this, or was it the year before?
Last year, last
Yeah,
March.
last year.
About a year ago.
Last year.
About a year ago. Yeah.
So now, obviously, private don't have to, but we have a private well testing law.
Right.
So if we have to add PFOs to that test, that's probably prudent, but what do you think about that? What do you guys think about that?
Well, I think it's apropos, I think absolutely. My concern is, and yes, I understand how dangerous these things are, but because, like the town engineer said, because the levels, the New York standard is so low, and you go just over it, like what happened with Worley Homes, my concern is that, you know, for some of the people who aren't really educated on it, there's gonna be panic. And I remember Councilman Beepan asking if we can get water from the federal government, and because it didn't reach their standard of 70 parts per trillion, we weren't able to get it. So I think the more education, the better about it, because it could cause a little bit of concern, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. And would that be a reason why someone would no longer want to, say, purchase a home? Because they see that 10 parts per trillion hit over
Right.
there.
Right.
And what happens if the state changes their threshold, right? So we'd have to be careful with our verbiage to make sure it just aligns with the state.
Right, correct. But even though Pinewood is so low, we've had other hits that are well above 100.
Right.
So it's just fortunate that theirs is on the low side, but it could be, you know,
Right. and
we have
that's-
other wells that are over 100, so.
And this is no real cheap solution for a home owner either to put this type of filtration in, right?
No, we looked at what they call POET systems, point of entry, which is what the DEC did, or the EPA did in Hopewell North, but, you know, you have to sample the water, and again, it's $1,200, you know, every
Right.
quarter or every 6 months that you got to sample. You got to maintain the systems and change the filters out, so it is expensive. That's why now we're actually honing in on one central treatment system, but even that is going to have an expense probably to the tune of $300,000 or $400,000, and that's just temporary. But again, we hope to apply to the state for a more permanent long-term range. Our discussions have been that they would allow us to include that temporary treatment as part of an overall, you know, project, and hopefully we can get 60/40, you know, reimbursement, 60 by the state and 40 we'll have to, or the district will have to bear.
Right.
But, you know, when you have, in the case of Pinewood, just 44 homes, you start spending $1 million, $1.5 million, it's big.
Yeah, and
No, absolutely.
there's a lot of communities across this town that don't have town water, so we don't really honestly know what the situation is there. And if, you know, God forbid they do have a hit there, I could see the demand for municipal water increasing to the beach homes.
Just some of the things we look at, so in the case of Pinewood, we also know, I'll say, you know, Hopewell, you know, Clove Branch Garden Apartments, which is a privately owned system, still residents within the town, but they are also over the limit. A health department would like whatever plan we come up with
To include them.
have enough capacity, you know, to include them.
Right.
Although it is a private system, and what we've asked the health department is, okay, we know we have a hit at Pinewood, we know we have a hit at Clove Branch, was even a little bit higher. You know, is there other data in the area to suggest, okay, what's the source and how widespread is this problem? Because as we try to come up with capacity and size pipes and come up with a plan, Are we talking about 40 people or 40 homes? Are we talking about 100 homes? Are we talking about 200 homes? You know, so we have our arms around what is the exact scope of this problem. Unfortunately, because the results were just above the limit, the DEC doesn't think it's of a high priority to, you know, expand their testing to kind of help
Surrounding area.
surrounding areas. So, I mean, you know, we've offered to go knock on doors if they would pay for the test, because, you know, again, to go to a homeowner, you may or may not be contaminated. Do you want to spend $1,200 to find out? What's the answer going to be? They're going to slam the door.
Right.
You know, so, but this is the difficulty, you know.
Yeah, we worked with the New York State Department of Health when we have the hits in the Hopewell Hamlet wells, and they did significant testing in the surrounding area because those levels were very high. So they were able to go to the private homes and do those.
And even then, I think, you know, more than half declined a free test.
Yeah, more than half declined. They went to them 3 different times, I believe, and said, we want to test your water, we'll pay for the testing, and no response. I don't know.
People don't want to know. It's amazing.
It's amazing.
I think the fear is if they're contaminated, how they sell their house.
Yeah.
Right.
But that's.
Well, if only we knew somebody who was going up to Albany that can fight to get some money back for some of these testing.
That would be good.
Hey, wait a minute.
Would be good. Councilman, any thoughts?
Scott, how much background information do we have as far as the testing data available statewide before they lower the threshold? Did they supply you with any of that information?
No.
Or was?
No, how they arrived at their 10, no.
It is very aggressive.
And it varies from state to state.
Yeah, the federal limit
Yeah.
is 70.
Correct.
Some states have
So
no
I was
limit.
wondering how New York State decided to lower the standards.
It's
by
arbitrary.
I think we know that answer, Councilman.
Yeah.
But it is good in a way, because, you know, we're going to now respond at a level before it becomes a real health risk, you know, so I think it's good in a way. You know, if you're going to err on the side of caution when it comes to health, I say.
But it could be dangerous for, like the councilman mentioned before, it could be dangerous in a community where it really could put you out of business. Where, you know, the problem could be so widespread that, you know, we really
Well,
don't have the funds and people really don't respond, like. they're
I
knocking
believe
on
the
doors.
funding is going to be coming from our discussions with the state, and, you know, that as part of this, we're looking, you know, to take advantage of that, and not only for Pinewood, but even for the hamlet to replenish the wells that we've lost. So our understanding is that they're not putting a cap on what the available funds will be if you qualify, so.
So there is money out there for this?
It appears so that there's money, and we will be applying for it.
I hope so.
Yeah, the state has to, if they're going to have a different standard than the federal government.
Well, and I think a lot of this came from what happened in Newburgh with their water supply, and the fact that they're still paying millions of dollars for substitute water, and it's the same chemical that was in the foam that caused that contamination.
Right.
Yeah, there was that big lawsuit with DuPont
Correct.
ago, right?
The Windsor, I think, yeah.
This is a chemical that we find in just everyday items like plastics and shampoo, and it's just, you know,
Plumber's
concentrated, you know.
So many things,
unfortunately.
your
Yeah.
pots and pans. I mean, it's amazing.
And actually, that's the unique part about the lawsuit we're in. We don't have to identify that there was a spill or a particular dispersal of the chemical here. The fact that it's here allows the lawsuit to be against the manufacturers. So we don't have to, it's under federal law, you can go after the manufacturer of these products. So that's how the lawsuit's being driven, is against the manufacturers of this chemical.
So as the plans unroll, engineer,
We will keep the board and the public advised, yes.
Excellent. And then once we get a final or close to final plan, we will invite the residents of Pinewood for a special meeting to discuss what will be happening, so.
Yes, I will add that our first deadline for submission for the grant is in June
Right.
with an engineer, and that's just a preliminary cost estimate, and then followed by an engineer's report in July. So that's the timetable for this year.
Okay. Any other comments, questions? So we are on top of this. We are meeting with the Department of Health regularly today, actually, again, and formulating our plan with them. So we will keep you posted as we move forward. Next item is chicken law discussion. So a lot of people have been calling. We were looking at this prior to COVID about allowing chickens to come up to be allowed on your property and how many, and, you know, there was big arguments on social media, whatever, but maybe it's time apropos to revisit it and take a look what we could possibly do. Town attorney, you want to give us a little background and how?
Sure. And also, we're hoping to come to the town board in May with a omnibus local law to clean up some things in the zoning ordinance. And we did have a prior discussion about this back actually in 2019. But the current zoning ordinance in East Fishkill requires you to have 10 acres or more to have a single chicken. And yet you can have a horse if you have 2 acres. So there must have been a story as to why in the 90s or 80s they adopted that. But in any event, we've taken a look at surrounding communities that have considered this. And so the proposal would be is to allow up to 30 chickens on less than 10 acres. You would have to have at least 1 acre, and there would be a percentage, which is 10% of the size of the lot. So if you had 2 acres, you could have up to 20 chickens. If you had 3 acres, you could have up to 30. 30 would be the limit.
Okay.
It would be...
So you have an acre, you're allowed 10?
Yes.
Right. No roosters.
No roosters?
Roosters would still have to be on 10 acres or more, because believe it or not, with the zoning board, we've had several applications over the years for variances from the section on chickens. And when the neighbors come in, the biggest complaint, some of them already had the chickens, biggest complaint is, of course, the rooster.
Right.
Howling and, you know, crowing.
Time to get up.
The other biggest complaint was the containment of the chickens, that they would wander out onto other people's property, onto the roads. So obviously, the proposal would require some sort of fencing. It also, if you look at animal rights groups, the minimum number of square feet per chicken would have to be at least 4 square feet. So if you're going to fence in an area, you need at least 4 square feet for each chicken that you're going to have. There would have to be an appropriate coop, and where the feed is would have to be in a rodent-proof container. And when you look online and you look at chicken raising, et cetera, these are all things that have been addressed by the community, and many companies sell these kinds of devices, et cetera, that would limit it. So all in all, it would require a setback of at least 25 feet from all surrounding lines. And obviously, there would be a requirement that you get a permit so that there could be a review to make sure everything is in its place before the chickens are running around.
And this would be residential only?
Right.
And you must have a house on that residential
Oh, yes, it
property?
has to be an R1, R2, R3 zone with a, this would be an accessory use, which means you have to have a residential use, which is the primary use in that district. Just the same as you can't have a shed or a garage or any of those things unless you have a house, principal
Right,
dwelling.
right.
So in a nutshell, that's what's proposed. We are, before we give you the final version in May, going to take one last look around at some communities that have already enacted this to see if they've revised it because of issues that came up that were unknown to us at the time.
Right, and maybe they've worked out the kinks, say it, right?
Right.
Other
You always-
communities, right.
Right. You always look to see the experience someone else has had, right?
So it just comes up time to time, and we have nothing to fall back on, so I think it's appropriate to do something.
Of course, not to be totally misleading, there are some more modern subdivisions that have private restrictions filed, so that this would not override them or supersede that. So if you're in a community where there's a restriction that there be no chickens, et cetera, that prevails, and that certainly will be accounted for in the ordinance, that the property owner has to show proof that there's no such restriction.
Okay.
I'm not sure if you guys covered this because I stepped out, but I feel like a lot of the reason people get chickens are for eggs, right? So how does that occur with no male? Is that like a, how do you get around?
No, that's to have more chickens.
Yeah, they still produce the
They
eggs.
still produce
eggs?
eggs.
They
I
don't become
know,
fertilized. Yeah.
All right, well, fair enough.
They can produce the eggs, they just can't have babies.
Biology lesson.
Without the male.
All right, fair enough.
What,
But
comments?
there's also, I
Questions?
think they're also good for eating ticks as well, which I think. in
Oh,
our
yeah,
area
that's a
is-
big, a lot of people get the chickens for the ticks removal, right?
And you can
Yeah.
reuse their, for fertilizer waste, which is good. This is an agricultural community. It used to be anyway, right?
Used to be, that's for sure.
But I
mean,
think
I,
the 25-foot setback and the containment by mesh or whatever to keep them online respects other people's rights that the
Right.
chickens
I
don't
think
come on the
it's-
property.
I
It's
think
just like if you're in a neighborhood and somebody's dog always comes in your yard, it's very disconcerting. It's not that you don't like dogs, but if you wanted a dog, you would have your own dog, and if you don't,
I think this is very reasonable. I recall years ago when we were discussing this, the great chicken controversy of East Fishkill.
Yeah.
Social media was lit abuzz with it, but, no, I think this is good. I think it's, I like the zoning district for it, the 10 per acre, up to 30. I think that's reasonable. And if it's not, then maybe we can review it after a year or so, or 2 years, see
Right,
how it's going.
absolutely, we could make
And we're going to have
changes to
an
it.
inspector, I would assume?
Well, yeah, it has to be inspected.
chicken inspector?
Absolutely. That has to be, make sure that the facilities are correct and that it's humane and everything else, Councilman, you said you had?
no, I was saying that this has been a big concern for the community. I mean, even though it's a light argument, but there's been a lot of concerns. For a while, it was a funny thing going around about this. I think we have a 1 acre zoning for a horse, but 10 acre
Five.
for the chicken.
5 for a horse,
Oh, I thought you said
1
2.
for, 10 for a chicken, yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
people
What
say,
came first?
But I think it's something that we need to clear. And the numbers, I mean, we could adjust it to whatever. There are people that they love to raise chicken for the eggs. I mean, that's a very common thing. And, but it's time that we really clean it up a little bit, yeah.
Right. Any other comments, questions? No? Councilman?
Nope, I'm good.
All right, with that, our next town board meeting is March 24, 2022. Motion to adjourn,
So moved.
second.
Second?
Favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting adjourned. Thank you.
36.